you realize that you can very easily spend quite a bit of cash, which you aren't used to spending. And, at that point in time, your money is stretched. And the thing that stretches it even more is the fact that you're either not getting an allowance, or the allowance that you're getting is a lot smaller than what you used to get when you're in university, because you don't have to go to school. So
the royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who might find it hard to breathe if you've got that asthma. He is also a man who recently included jumping to conclusions as part of his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. I am here to talk about money, relationships, and, young people's minds, because it feels like there might be a little bit of a discrepancy there in terms of relationships and money and people's relationships with money. And to assist some people live life a little bit better, it's best that I try and explain things from, a slightly older person's perspective, considering that I will mostly be discussing younger people, and, just show that sometimes it's not just about the money. You can have the relationship, but it's not really about the money, it's about something else. Which is where the whole mindset tweak kind of comes in. And I do intend to get into all of that. But first of all, if you are listening to this podcast and you have listened thus far, thank you so much. I hope you listen all the way till the end. And should you like the episode, should you not like it, should you want to give some sort of feedback, or if you want to suggest a topic, then you can hit me up on social media. The links are usually in the description just about all the time. And if you don't feel like going through the description and looking for the links, let me just tell it to you. On IG, it is at the Breakdown_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breakdown Podcast. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. And on Bluesky, if you are on that app, it is at the breakdownpod.bsky.social. The DMs are always open, and I would be more than happy to look at your DMs and to handle them accordingly. Now, I should probably be getting into the main topic, because there is quite a little bit that I need to get into, because there's almost like a 2 or 3 stage into this entire thing. But before I can get into any of that, first of all, I want to discuss money in terms of how sometimes people can have a little bit more money than sense, and companies just love milking such people because that's where they can get some really good margins. And the company in question this particular time is Lamborghini. Now, Lamborghini recently partnered up with a British nursery brand known as Silvercross to create a limited edition super stroller, which, let's be quite honest, this shit wasn't going to be cheap, is to be sold for, get this, $5,000. And it's $5,000 a stroller, not for an entire set or some shit like that. It's just a stroller. If this isn't the definition of have a baby by me, baby, be a millionaire, then I don't know what is. Okay, it also is a definition of just very, very dumb spending of money, but you know what? Let me get into some of the details, because it's a very short caption that had this story, so I'll just read it real quick. So it says, and I quote, Lamborghini has partnered up with British nursery brand Silvercross to create the limited edition Reef AL Arancio super stroller. Priced at $5,165 and limited to 500 units, it blends luxury with all-terrain functionality. Featuring full suspension wheels, supercar-inspired handlebars, performance suede, and Lamborghini's signature orange accents, it ensures comfort and style. Available exclusively at Harrods, the stroller includes premium accessories like a caricot, foot muff, and rain covers. End quote. Okay, so let me get this straight. Lamborghini basically decided, and mind you, for those of you all that don't know who or what Lamborghini is, it is a luxury sports car or supercar maker, and they specialize in making supercars, and you could also argue hypercars for people that have quite a bit of money. And normally, whenever it comes to making sports cars, supercars, and hypercars, one of the things that you realize is that these guys don't really pay that much attention to comfort. And even though you got Lamborghini suspension on a baby stroller, I feel like the baby will be more uncomfortable in that than in just your typical stroller that is just well made. Because supercar and sports car suspension is usually hard. Check any review of a supercar, of a sports car, and wait until they get to the part where they talk about suspension. if they don't talk about the fact that, fortunately the suspension can be soft and supple and it can be comfortable at times, for the most part, they will be talking about how the suspension is hard and it makes the car very track focused because it doesn't get to move around as much. When it's stiff suspension, it's basically very rigid, and it means that you can, move around without being thrown around all that much, something like that. And you look at it, like someone is going to decide to go and pay $5,000, or to be exact, $5,165, just so that they can say that they put their kid in a Lambo baby stroller. Like, if you said that this was an accessory so that you can add it to your Lambo car, it would have made sense. But as a stroller, though, I don't care what accessories they have, it doesn't really make sense to have a $5,000 stroller because it's been made by Lamborghini. This is like the nigh equivalent of that thing where like they had the smallest Birkin, I think, in the world, which was like barely able to fit on someone's finger. Like, it was such a tiny thing that it didn't even make sense, and it was just kept as like one of those like sort of collectibles and shit like that. Like, I wouldn't think that someone who's spending $5,000 on a Lamborghini stroller is really going to spend that much time having their kid on it, even though they want their kid to really, really love cars. Although, then again, I could be wrong about this, and maybe there are people that, are very sporty and very, sport focused whenever they're walking their kids, such that they have to have them on like a Lamborghini stroller with orange accents, and they might actually look at it and think of this as a particularly good deal. The only thing that this will ever give you is bragging rights, because you can say that your baby rides in a Lambo every single day, even though you walk. But then again, if you have the kind of money whereby your baby can be strolled around in a Lambo every single day, you probably won't be the one walking. It might be your maid, and if anything, it might just get damaged just like every other baby stroller that's out there, and it's just going to be a pain to fix. Although, then again, considering that I don't know anything about strollers or babies and liking sporty suspension, because I pull out, I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode. Now, of late, I've been trying to give a little bit more attention to younger men, because very recently I was being told that my content can actually be a pretty good beacon and can help a lot of young men in terms of navigating the world. And it kind of did touch me, so much so that I felt like speaking to them should be a good thing. And even with all the stuff that I may talk about in relation to like relationships and like people getting married and shit, and like stuff in like marriages and everything, of which I usually try to avoid, I do also like kind of going back and speaking to the younger man, just the younger version of me that's trying to navigate life and relationships and trying to kind of find that footing in the world. And whenever I stumble across content that kind of relates to that, I kind of love kind of getting into it. So when I bumped into this question about the dating scene after you graduate from campus, that was posted up by a particularly young dude, I kind of did want to jump into the whole idea of talking about it, because there is quite a bit to learn. And much as some people might not think about it, like there's a massive adjustment process that comes with it. And fortunately, I was able to kind of, retain some of my memory on how all of that went down. It was titled Dating Scene, so the story goes, and I quote, "This is an open question to all genders. However, I hope more men interact with this. How are you finding the dating scene, especially for lads who've graduated college? Do you think women ask for too much in terms of financial support? And for men who have their lives together, do you feel like you're in a partnership or dependency situation with your significant other? Lastly, do some people here think they'll stay childless and single till eternity? Let's hear what you have to say." End quote. And okay, for me, I kind of would probably just get done with probably the last question, because that one doesn't entirely affect me per se. Do some people here, or do I think I'll stay childless and single until eternity? I don't think so. Personally, I do want to have a long-term partnership with children, and the idea of being single and alone and childless for the rest of eternity just doesn't really feel like something that I would be very okay with. But that's just me. That's just me. The second question, I feel like that one you kind of would have to like figure this one out on a subjective level, just mostly because there are some people that feel like their partners are just dependents and they are basically depending on them for provision. And this is from a guy's point of view, while there are a few others that feel like their partner is very supportive and they are actually in a partnership. But like let me kind of just backtrack and start with the first one. So the experience of dating once you get done with campus, like it's actually a bit of like a reality check for a lot of guys, or at least let me speak for myself, because I feel like over the past 10 years, if you were to take the experiences of different men and look at the experience with like the dating market after they got done with campus 10 years ago versus 5 years ago versus 3 years ago, I feel like you're going to have very stark differences in their experiences. And all of those are for particularly various reasons. Now, for me, I graduated about 5 years ago. That was in 2019. So I basically graduated into COVID. And my experience is probably very different from a guy that graduated last year, for example. But it's also very different from a guy that graduated 10 years ago when the job market was a little bit nicer than it currently is right now. So you can kind of see that there's gonna be massive differences in that. But I feel like, at least for me who graduated 5 years ago, my experiences aren't too far off in terms of like dating post-campus. So I can probably give a little bit of information. Now, I will start by, like I said, speaking for myself. My dating experience post-graduation was very different. Now, to give a bit of a backstory, when I was in university, I was fairly popular and I could basically interact with most of anyone, and provided that I could meet you within the walls and the boundaries of school or even just around school, I didn't really feel like, there was anyone that was completely inaccessible. So me graduating and moving into being a quote unquote typical civilian was a massive shift for me, because the first thing that I noticed was that you don't have as much access to people. And I'll admit this does feed into the statement that I have been saying for quite a while, which is like when you go to university, you're basically getting a free trial at the good life. And you should enjoy it to the absolute max, because once you get done with uni, stuff is completely different. There's standards and everything, blah blah blah. Like that was the experience that I got when I got to university. You could basically access just about anyone. No one was supposedly too special that you couldn't interact with them. But the moment you all get done with school, the thing that would be keeping the guy that doesn't come from particularly good money and the guy that comes from really good money, which is, the education that you guys were going to get, is basically gone. So you guys probably wouldn't interact all that much, not unless if you guys find each other in some random street somewhere or in some random place somewhere else. Also, if the person that you're trying to interact with is from, say, for example, a different country or a different county or town, like there's a very good chance that you guys probably wouldn't interact together, not unless if they stay around those ends and you continue going around those ends. So essentially, one of the first things that you kind of realize is that you can't access people as easily as you used to, because you guys aren't going to the same places anymore. So that was the very first thing I noticed. And the next thing that I noticed was just how big of a difference money made in the real world, if I can call it that. Because like when you're in university, like there's a lot of places around school that aren't all that expensive. Now don't get me wrong, I'd still go to particular restaurants with a couple of my friends that might have been considered a little pricey, and I could do that from time to time with a couple of my people, no biggie. And us guys would also go get drinks, not necessarily just the cheap ones. And even though I didn't drink, guys were buying booze and they could manage to fund buying themselves particularly nice booze. Like that was something that used to happen with me and my friends. But the moment you get done with university, first of all, especially for guys, it's either your allowance gets cleared out completely or it becomes a much smaller amount than is there. Secondly, not unless if you live around a place where like certain foods or like simpler foods or junk foods are particularly cheap, you're going to be spending more in the name of food. like you will realize that a decent meal isn't going below like say 250 for most people, not unless if you're going to a kibanda. If you're around university, there's a very good chance that you could eat with even less than that. Granted, I was in university quite a bit of a while ago, so it was definitely less than that. But like now you want to go meet up with someone and you're going to some place to sit, chill and eat, and let's say that it's a place that's like a franchise with junk food, the minimum you're spending is like what, maybe around 350, possibly around 500 if you include the fact that you're gonna need a drink. And the moment you include transport in that, depending on how far you are and you know where you guys are choosing to meet as like a central point, you realize that you can very easily spend quite a bit of cash, which you aren't used to spending. And you know, at that point in time your money is stretched, and the thing that stretches it even more is the fact that you're either not getting an allowance, or the allowance that you're getting is a lot smaller than what you used to get when you're in university, because you don't have to go to school. So that was the next thing that hits you. Like the money issue is like a massive thing that kind of hits you, and it hits you from two different sides, and you kind of have to force yourself to now have to adapt to one, not having as much money, and two, having to figure out who to meet with and how much money you intend on spending. So you'll either be forced to learn how to budget, you know, otherwise you won't have any money to do most of the shit after like one or two interactions, or you will, you know, try and find an alternative source of income, or just a source of income in general, so that you can at least try to move around as much. Otherwise, you're probably gonna be stuck in the house quite a bit, because you know the access to money is basically just cut off to a very, very small amount. And yes, I know there's someone that's probably sitting down thinking, how the fuck does any of this relate to dating? Like, trust me, this is like a build up to like you trying to get into the dating market right after graduating, or after graduating and you're, you know, like a fresh civilian out here in these streets. So the next issue is going to be the location issue. Now, if you were lucky enough to stay outside of your parents' place, or if you were lucky enough to have moved out and stayed at your own place or at a hostel while you were in school, and you are even luckier that even after graduation, you know, your parents are still covering rent and like sending you money for bills and shit, then you are great. You are in one of the best positions ever, because the change isn't going to be all that big for you after you get done graduating, because you can still call up a babe every so often. Maybe you might not get as much money, but you'll probably still get a standard amount of cash, so you can probably keep up most of the lifestyle that you had in uni. And considering that most of those people live close to the university, they probably will still be attracting more or less the same people, so life doesn't have to change as drastically for them as it does for most other guys. But the unfortunate reality is that isn't most guys. That isn't most guys. Most guys, if you haven't bagged like a job or some shit within the first like 3 months post graduation, you're gonna be told to move back to the house. You know, some people, the moment graduation ended, they were basically told, just pack your shit, go back to the house. Other people, even before graduation, if, you know, they had a bunch of free time before graduating, they were probably told, just move back to the house, because it's a massive bill taking care of someone's rent and bills, and they're not staying in the house, and yet they'd have probably been, you know, more efficient or like cheaper to run if, you know, they came and stayed at your place. So like, let's assume that you were one of the many people that had to go back to their parents' places, all right? The issue of location becomes a very, very big thing for you, because not only is it you trying to like adjust, you know, moving back home and the boundaries that your parents set for you, blah, 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 but also as a guy, because, you know, I can only speak for guys in this one, your ability to date and get intimate with women gets severely hindered. It is severely hindered. And I will tell you for a fact that actually does play a toll on guys quite a bit, and the ability to date and get intimate with multiple other women, or just women in general. Because, like, let's be particularly honest, this is 2025 as of the time of this recording. Like, people nowadays are sort of sensitized to, you know, go and spend time together and get intimate with each other in a manner that requires them to get a room. Now, it's not like your parents are gonna be like, all right, go bag a babe, bring her to the house and shag her. So you do have to find an alternative. Now, you know, there are some of those guys that'll come in clutch for you, those friends that'll be like, it's all right, it's cool, you can use my place, but how long will you be able to keep that up? How many times will you be able to do that before the friend is like, nah, you can't use my place, or you're using it a little too much and I also want my space, blah, blah, blah. And that can also become an issue for you when you're trying to date. And yes, everything that I've mentioned does heavily actually impact a guy's dating experience after they get done with campus. And with that said, now let's look into actually dating, because now all of this kind of does lead into the whole dating experience. Now, first of all, like, if you are trying to date, I will tell you for a fact, the first thing that's gonna really hit you is the money aspect. For a young guy with very minimal money and you're trying to meet up with a babe, you of course want to take her to just, like, first of all, let's look at just the very simple places where you can meet up. A nice simple franchise with junk food, like your typical KFC, Pizza Inn, Creamy Inn and whatnot. You are definitely spending money there. Not unless if it's someone that, you know, lives around your place and you guys can just sort of chill together. For the most part, if you're going to meet with someone, then you're probably going to go to a place like that if you want to keep costs low. If you want to preserve some sort of status, then you'll probably try and do some place like Java, Art Cafe, and so on and so forth. But all in all, you will be spending money to do that. And on top of that, because people do like using booze as a social lubricant, you know, you might have to pay for a cocktail or two. Or, you know, you guys might have to go and grab some booze so that, you know, you can have a little bit of fun together. And all of that shit costs money. So not unless if you guys are doing it as a group and, you know, maybe you guys can subsidize the costs amongst yourselves. If you do that, there's a very good chance that a lot of that is going to come out of pocket and you don't have as much money to do that. That's one of the first things that will hit you when you get done with campus, when you're trying to date, when you are trying to interact with the opposite sex. The money issue is going to basically come and slap you on the head, and it's going to end up becoming one of the biggest elephants that's going to be in front of you, that's going to obstruct you for a good chunk of your life up until a certain point in time when you can move past it. Then the next issue is going to be the location issue, and that is going to be like the next big issue that you have. Fine, yes, you can go and you can manage to bag a babe, but where are you guys gonna go and get intimate? That's gonna be the second issue that you go through. Now, I didn't mention the access issue, and I did that very deliberately because nowadays people can slide into each other's DMs, but in terms of like actually getting access to someone who probably wouldn't respond to your DMs because you're not physically there or they just don't know you, like, the whole access issue kind of does become a thing. Now, not everyone is trying to bag a baddie, not everyone is trying to go for someone with 10k followers on TikTok, but, you know, some of those people are the babes that guys want. So if you want to hit on such a babe, then it's probably easier for you to do it in person than to try and slide into DMs, because you'll be one amongst 100 that'll be doing it on DMs as opposed to in person. So essentially, it's just going to be harder for you, and then you will realize that the whole access issue becomes very prevalent for you. Now, with all of that said, one of the first things I can tell you is that when it comes to dating post-graduation, there's a very good chance that you'll be dating back or dating down, if I can call it like that, and you will probably be trying to ignite some sparks with some people that still might be in university with you, just as, you know, your best bet. Because if you're trying to interact with people that you graduated with, it's going to be a lot harder, because some of these people will have gotten jobs. Some of these people will be earning salaries. Someone that earns a salary of, even call it 50k a month, even call it 30k a month, is doing a hell of a lot better than a guy that is barely able to scrape by with like 5k a month. Like, when you kind of look at the differences, like, you can clearly see that the person that is making 30 G's a month can definitely afford to do a couple of different things. The guy that's making a few G's or barely fuck all will not be able to do the same things, and that means that they just can't interact as much, and that now starts to create a ridge in terms of your ability to interact with the other person. Like, money kind of does become a very big filter for a lot of guys when it comes to dating post graduating campus. So, like, there's a very good chance that you might be going back to date people that you know from campus, and more so those that are still in campus. Then the next thing is that the biggest elephant you're going to have is money. And by elephant, I mean the obstacle, the thing that obstructs your view to seeing a lot of other things as they are, your biggest elephant is going to be money. And unfortunately for most guys, the elephant that is money is going to be in front of you for most of your life if you do not find a way to get around the entire thing. Especially with today's day and age where everyone is busy talking about not wanting brokies and making bank and hustle culture and shit, the biggest elephant that's going to be in front of you for a while is probably going to be money. Not unless if you rewire your mindset. And the reason I talk about rewiring your mindset is because whenever you're busy looking ahead and the elephant that is money is always there, you'll automatically always think, oh, I'm going to go and interact with so and so. But maybe I'll be looked at for the fact that I don't have money, or I need money to do this, I need money to do that, or I can't date, any of these women if I don't have money. And, I need to make sure I have a lot of it so that I can date so and so. And the truth of it is, that's not really the case. Okay, yes, you do need some money so that you can access some facilities and some environments and some experiences, which would make it easier for, the people that you'd want to be with to, sort of view you or have access to you. But you don't really need money all that much. And it's something that I can say with a certain level of certainty after being out here for a couple of years. There's a lot of women that don't care about money all that much. And actually, provided that you can kind of hold your own financially and maybe have a little bit extra just in case as a disposable income, you can probably navigate through the dating market particularly well. But if you're always looking at, does so and so have money, but I need money to do this and that, then not unless if you're dating a high maintenance babe, there's a very good chance that you're missing out on a lot of good potential options in partners simply because you have an elephant in front of you that's called money that you need to get out of the way, or you need to move past so that you can actually see that there's all of these great options that don't necessarily require for you to have a lot of money to be with. And it is something that a lot of guys do kind of end up struggling with. And now, last but not least, the next thing that you do notice is how vast the dating market is. Now, let's go back to the whole thing of you graduating with a couple of people that you were interested in who eventually just got jobs a lot earlier than you did, and they make money and they can interact with people differently and their problems are different, blah blah blah. Yes, you may not have access to such people, you may not have access to those particular people because they are part of a dating market that is much more vast, that has a lot more players who, some of them just have very, very serious unfair advantages, such as making probably 10 times more than you do. And they are willing to spoil that babe because they have way more disposable income they can throw at that. And that kind of gives them that unfair advantage. So they could probably go out on trips with her, probably travel even outside of the country with her and, be able to cover such costs. There are guys that will be able to get them some of the latest and nicest things. There are guys that will be able to spend serious amounts of money on them. And even beyond just the money side of it, which I feel like I've probably belabored quite a bit, they can definitely give more in other areas. These are guys that may have access to particularly good connections. These are guys that can give them, access to certain influential people that they want to use to move up on. And by they, I mean the women that you probably would have wanted to be with. Some of these guys are just way more mature, and that is more appealing to the babe or babes that you are trying to be with. And as such, you realize that they may not be as attainable as initially thought, or as they initially used to be when you guys were in campus together. And that might suck. But on the flip side, there's other people that are out here that are prime for dating, that are prime for interacting with and, getting close with and developing some sort of relationship with. And they're not just the people that you went to university with, and a lot more of them could probably be a lot better of a partner to you. But you won't really notice that up until you get to that point where you get past a bunch of these things and actually put yourself out there in the dating market. Which kind of leads me to my conclusion to all of this, which is Dating post-graduation is a very interesting experience. It will vary from guy to guy, although I have tried to bring out the similarities, and for most guys, it may end up going down the way I sort of mentioned it. Now, is there a hack to get around the entire thing? Well, probably start dating before you finish university, of which even then it's not entirely guaranteed. But all in all, for most guys, it is one of those kind of situations where you just get thrown into the deep end and you have to figure out your style of swimming. Otherwise, you will drown and you will feel bad and you will become bitter and you will just end up talking shit about women. Although, then again, I might be wrong about the entire thing, and maybe people's experiences are thoroughly different, a hell of a lot better than how I've been portraying them. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. And on X, it is at Bagak the D, as well as Bluesky, which is at the breaktimepod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.